So right now our app is running. Let's go ahead and get rid of Postman. I don't need it right now. If I go to localhost 3000, I'll realize that I'm not going to end up seeing anything. Actually, let's make sure our site is started. So if I go over here, I'll realize that I can't find my file. So let's set that up. And then we'll talk about setting up Webpack, because this is a pretty easy step. This is going to be index.html. We're going to have an HTML tag, a closing HTML tag, a head tag, a closing head tag. We're going to have a body tag, another body tag. And just to see that this is working, we could go over here, and that error should end up going away. Okay? What we really want to be able to do here is we want to be able to pull a file in here. So we're going to have, we'll also just set up Bootstrap so that it looks okay. So we'll have a style sheet. And this is going to be, if you remember, we have that vendor directory set up. This is going to be bootstrap, dist, CSS, bootstrap.css. And we're going to go over here and we're going to do a script tag. And this is going to be source equals / and this is going to be dist bundle.js. Now, one of the things that we want to do here is that we're going to have this root of our application. And one of the things that we're going to want to do is that we're going to want to attach our React application to this root. But before we do it, let's actually get Webpack set up. A couple of things we're going to end up needing. So I'm going to actually open up a new tab here. I'm going to kill this because I'm going to want to run things a little bit differently. I'm going to say Npm Install. Let me actually get Bootstrap in here. Save. So I'm going to need Webpack. And there's a couple of other things that I'm going to end up needing. So Webpack, again, in the end, what Webpack is going to do is going to be able to sort of pack up all of our client-side files. Again, you can end up using it for things like CSS files as well. But for our case, what we're really going to end up using it for is we want it to prepare our files. So our files are going to be written in a format where we want to put JSX in the files. We also want to put ES6 in the files. So Webpack is going to go through the process, but Webpack needs a helper. And the helper that it's going to end up needing is going to be Babel. Okay, so there's two, Babel sort of separated out its modules a little bit, so there's two Babel modules that we're going to need, and then we're going to need the plugins that we're going to use for Babel. So, there's going to be a little bit of a soup here of things, but we'll talk about what the purpose is of all these are, and I'm going to say Npm Install Webpack. Okay? I'm also going to end up needing Babel Loader and Babel Core. Okay? I could get those two, and I could end up saving them. So Babel and Babel Core basically are going to allow us to specify how our files end up transpiling. And so what I really want to do is I want ES6 code to work in the browser. So I'm going to need what's called a preset for Babel for ES6. And I'm also going to need a preset for Babel for React. So for those two things, I'm going to do another Npm install, and I'm going to end up grabbing an Npm install. And this is basically, think about presets in the plural, but for individual presets, it's going to be a module called Babel Preset React, Babel Preset ES 2015. So I'm going to get those as well. This is going to be Babel Preset ES 2015, Babel Preset ES, React. And I'm going to save those. Now, again, what I want to do here is that I'm going to go back to my package.json file. Again, I've got all these modules that are here. You can see them here. And I'm going to put a task in here called Webpack. And what Webpack is going to do, I'm going to go and look in the Web Modules folder for Webpack. There's a bin directory. Webpack.js is what I want to run. Okay? So if I just went to run that, I could go over here, npm run webpack. And I'll get an error message. And the error message that says, hey, look, Webpack at a minimum needs to know your entry point and your output point. So I'm going to go over here and start setting that up. I'm going to say a touch webpack config.js. And I'll go back over here. And this is going to be my Webpack config, module exports. So really only two things we need. We're going to need one other thing because we want to do our transpiling. But I'm going to say the entry is going to be /source index.js. Okay? That's the starting point. Again, things get packed based upon that starting point. I'll say for the output, there are two things that I need. Path, which is basically the directory. I'm going to say /dist. And for the file name, I'm going to say bundle.js. Okay? Now, if I go to run this, it's going to look for that Webpack config file. So if I go back here and I run that again, and I should get a different error message that it says it can't find my source. So let's go over here. And we'll add our source. And we'll say index.js. And if I do that, just by even having an empty file, this should end up going away. And if I went over here, I could actually go over here and see that I've got my dist folder. And within my dist folder, I've got a file, although it's not going to be quite empty. If I went over here and I said cat dist bundle, I would see I've got this file, but notice there's nothing in here, which would have been the code that I ended up writing. Okay? So let's go back over here, and what we'll end up doing here is, just for a starting point, we'll say console.log, hello world, and we'll end up running this again. And if I go back and I say npm run start dev, I should be able to open this up. And if I have my tools open up here on the right, and I reload this, I should see my hello world, which tells me that it's finding my file. Now, what I want to do here is I'm going to kill this as I start to set this up. There's a couple of things that I need in order for React to work. I'm going to say npm install React. I'm also going to need React DOM. Okay? And I'm going to say save. So let me go over to this file here, and instead of having this here, again, I'm going to have to make some changes in order for import and stuff to work, but I'm going to import React from React. Okay? I'm also going to import, so this is where you could export multiple things from basically what's an npm package or a file. I'm going to import render from React DOM. And what I'm going to end up doing over here, I'm going to say render. What am I going to render? I'm going to do my standard HR tag, document get element by ID, and this is going to be my root. Okay? Now, there's going to be a number of issues with this working. First of all, if I end up going in and saying npm run webpack, right, I end up getting a couple of issues here. Unexpected token, can't really do anything with that. And what I'm getting at here is that I want to specify in my Webpack config that I want to use those loaders that I loaded. So it's going to be module, loaders, and here I'm going to have a loader. You could have multiple loaders that handle different types of files. So what a loader basically is going to do is I'm going to say test, okay? And I'm just using a pretty simplistic regular expression. I have to escape out the dot. This is my regular expression, any file that ends with JS. I want to also exclude, I don't want it to look in the node modules folder, which you could end up doing. And for my loader, I'm going to end up specifying that I want to use Babel as my loader. And here, I'm basically going to use this syntax for a query that says query, presets, and the two that I'm going to use are going to be React, ES 2015. Okay? So what that means is that it's going to actually, since I'm using Babel, it's going to look for a Babel preset React, a Babel preset ES 2015, both of which end up existing. So that means if I didn't make any mistakes here, and we go back and try to run this again, it should end up outputting that. And if I was to go in here and say cat dist bundle.js, and I go back here, if I look up here, I could see, probably find somewhere or other, if I did a search, where it's probably doing whatever it is, React, create element. If I dug in here a little bit more, I could probably end up finding it. You can see there's quite a bit of code that's here. Sort of would expected it to be here by the bottom, but we could dig in and probably end up finding it. The main thing is that it ended up generating this file. Now, in order to put this all together, again, not all that complicated, okay? Again, configuration file, you don't necessarily have to memorize that stuff, but if you're going to memorize something, it's not a ton of stuff to get Webpack working. You're going to, invariably be working on a project with a huge, people could be using gulp to get the same results, but just doing this with standard NPM tasks is totally fine, okay? So I'm going to modify this slightly to set up my environment. And what I'm going to do over here is that when I go to do start dev, I'm going to say npm run webpack. And I want to pass to that the watch flag. So I want to pass it to the underlying webpack. So the -- says pass to the underlying process, the W flag. Also, but don't wait for it to finish because it'll never finish if it's watching a file. Also, I want you to run nodemon, but do me a favor because nodemon is for the server. Ignore anything that changes in the source folder. Ignore anything that changes in the dist folder. That should be enough to get Webpack set up. And so now if I was to say npm run start dev, we could get our dev started, our Webpack is running, and if we go back over here, we'll run into one issue, and this is a sort of minor one, where it's telling us that our container is not a valid node, and the reason why that's the case is that if we go back here, this is running, we have one of two options. We can move this to the bottom, or we can specify, hey, look, don't run this until the page ends up loading, in which case that error should end up going away, and we get a beautiful horizontal rule on the page. That's basically the setup of Webpack. Fairly simplistic setup. The config file is not really all that crazy. A couple of modules that we had to put in here, our package JSON file, a few different lines. But again, it's sort of important to see that you could run these processes and send flags there as well. If we're going to deploy this, one of the things probably we want to do is that if we ended up deploying it somewhere, there's going to be a post-install that's going to end up running. And here we would just say npm run webpack, okay? We don't want it to watch, but we want it to go and run that task. So, and actually I should throw one other thing here. If I go over here and I say, let me kill this, I say git.status. Notice my dist folder is there. I really don't want that there. It's a huge file. I don't need it here. So I should go over here and I should say touch.get ignore, and I'm going to say echo dist into .get ignore. So if I say cat.get ignore, I'll see dist, and if I say npm status, git status, I'll see that that dist folder is now being ignored. So I could say git.add dot, git.commit.m, added Webpack, and so that's the setup of Webpack.
Did Echo just concatenate that string inside the file?
Yeah, the echo command, yeah. And I could open it up, but for whatever reason, and this is something I should probably look at, is that I have a hard time opening up dot files in my Vim editor, and I'm sure that's some basic configuration that I haven't quite figured out. Okay, so let's stop this one.